trying to solve. So then you want to set your data governance goals and priorities based on these problems that you're trying to solve, not the other way around. So don't have the tail wagging the dog. You want to set your goals and your approaches to get your priorities around governance. When we've talked about that list of the content and the processing on that, based on what problems you're trying to solve. All right. So what are the data governance goals? This is really around best practices that we want to set. So the first at the high level is what I call like sort of the table stakes, or an ante, and they have to sort of the framework which you need to start off. So these are baseline best practices that you need to implement in some capacity. So and that is defining stewardship, right? So and then establishing some sort of data governance knowledge base to retain this information around all that content, definitions, catalog, all that kind of stuff. And then establishing some sort of communication process or tool, right? So what is the method which we are going to communicate, right? And I'm going to dive into these a little bit more later, but this is sort of the first thing, is to think about establishing these baseline best practices. And then the next thing is then, once you have that generally in place, or at least a framework for it, is then to say, well, what are our goals around which piece of this content is important for us? Is it the definitions? Is it the data deliverables catalog, the data requests process, the data inventory and lineage, the data quality, data access, data security? Okay, which one of these you focus on first, or the priority of them, is really going to depend on the problems that you've defined in the first step. And for the sake of time, I don't want to sort of go through that, but you can imagine how, for instance, if people don't know how to report, like if that's the issue, then maybe it's about having a data inventory, right? And maybe data definitions is your first process, so they know how, like that your developers have more information to do what they're doing. If it's about sort of trust or doing data, it could be definitions or the data. It's a whole bunch of different things, but you want to think about which one of these areas is the best approach. And as you'll probably see, like I'll cover several times later, I do not recommend trying to tackle all these problems at once, right? It is okay to start with, a knowledge base that only has a handful of things in it, or stewardship that only is in one area, or, you only start with definitions. Like these are things that you grow into, so prioritization is important.